Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil karim. Saudara pemangku rektor, Proses Haji Datuk Yaakob Mirza yang membantu menyelaraskan acara ini bersama Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, Dr. Ahmad Cutonji dan rakan-rakan dimuliakan. Saya juga turut melahirkan rasa penghargaan kerana dapat bersama-sama melancarkan satu tabung yang akan memberikan kesan dan makna kepada pembelajaran anak-anak di universiti. Now I must confess that it is very sentimental occasion for me, particularly coming back to this university, but more so because I'm honoring a great friend, a brother, whom I've known since 70s, who was Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. Remember, I always mention as a Malay, we say Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. He always said, Brother Sulaiman. On my speeches, then I go and repeat the same mistake because Professor Kamal did not stress this to me earlier. I have to say Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. So my grandson, Usu Sulaiman, the spelling is M-A-A-N. Because of, if it's read by Abdul Hamid, he will send another note of protest. Now, he was then the Secretary General of the NADWA, the World Assembly of Muslim Youth. And it was soon after I was released from prison, I think 74. Too many times I was released from prison, I could mention the year. So this was 75. 74, and then I was invited, Ahmad was there, to serve as the UAMI representative for the Asia Pacific region. We got to know, then we became very much associated together with the team, with Al-Mahfoum Ismail Farouqi, who was the pillar then of the International Institute of Islamic Thought. I was roped in as a young activist. I wasn't a scholar. Probably the only non-scholar in the International Institute of Islamic Thought. Then, of course, these were the period of turbulence, juxtaposition of ideas, a profound challenge to the normative mode of thinking, which would insist on a certain paradigm for education and university education. And but there were growing voice among Muslim intellectuals and scholars since the 70s to then undertake this major task of setting up an Islamic university, not in a traditional sense of the Kulliyah Sharia or the Islamic University as known, but to have a modern concept of education that encompasses various disciplines. And I, of course, then in 83, I joined the government in 82, and Tun Mahathir then was very supportive, both of the Islamic Bank and Islamic University, and we started that sort of a commitment. But when I assumed the position of Education Minister, I realized that these institutions would only be rendered meaningful if it is deemed to be institutions that are credible, academically and even as an institution. The plan was to set up a university, but I think what was criticized as partly expedient because of the dictates of the time. But when I assumed the Minister of Education, one of the first things, a month after I assumed, once I settled down, I thought we have to not necessarily rebrand, but really make it really rather meaningful establishment through institutions, and bringing in some other scholars overseas to help. But the system, the bureaucratic rules would not be attractive enough, particularly scholars who have been attached to universities in the States or UK or Europe, because the salary and relations are certainly much better. So I thought, just immediately after discussing with Tun Mahathir, I said, look, I'm bringing a friend, Hamid, to take over as rector. After I took over as president of IIU, from the late Tun Hussein On, the former Prime Minister, was very cordial and very supportive. He was joking, he said, you know, I had to learn a few Arabic words when I was president of the university. But he was very supportive, very kind. But of course, coming from that tradition, he wouldn't have neither that vision nor the commitment to make it as a profound intellectual center. So I discussed this with Tun Mahathir. He was quite agreeable. You know, those days he tends to agree with me quite a lot. So I got my way, and in the car, I remember that was when we just started using this new smartphone, but it's, you know, the bulky ones. So I called Hamid. I said, you are invited to come here to become director of the university. He was shocked, because I mean, for him it is a major shift from Washington DC to Kuala Lumpur. He thought I would have just invited him to come as a, you know, visiting professor, giving advice. He was trying to argue, you know, Arabs, they argue a lot, comparable to the Indians, and we Malays will lose out. So I said, Hamid, can you just listen for a change? We have been talking about this a long time. I haven't too many lectures. Come and do something. I was a bit stern. After all, I was a minister. So you can sound a bit stern. Now, of course, I have to be polite. I'm just like you, nobody. Now, so I said to him, look, this is a chance. I'm here. I'm Minister of Education. I'm President of the University, and we'll do it. Of course, he said he also had followed the development and in terms of education, grants, which is virtually very small, which is nothing at that time. I said, that's not your problem, that's my problem. You just come. When? Tomorrow. So he said, give me a week. He discussed with Faika, his wife, was very supportive. So he came. So that was the beginning. But to my horror, he must listen to this. This man was not an ordinary academic. Okay? And of course I had to treat him as a brother. And he treats me as a brother. So in public sessions, he's exceedingly polite. He's very respectful. He's Dato Seri that. But in private, when we discuss, it was continuous warfare. Because he was passionate. And he said to me, you want a university as any other university, what is deemed to be politically expedient, so you can tell the world we have an Islamic university, or we want to have the Islamic university. Not only conceptually, but also institution. Because, you know, we have always shared the view in the International Institute of Islamic Thought that education and building institutions is a key component towards the building of civilizations. It is a civilizational effort, which means it's not just a center of excellence, but excellence to perform and build a civilization. Now he is right. So in terms of ideas, there's no conflict. But I had my limitations. I have to be seen to be quite fair to the other universities too. And of course, as emerging political leader in the country, I'm of course under this radar. Not all are supportive. Even some so-called Islamists from the party was not too supportive because of their neo-conservative outlook. To them, an Islamic university means their understanding of Islam. Gender separation, complete, and the focus on the traditional understanding of Islamic studies. And even if we, it has to be Arabic. I see they can have Arabic in many Middle East institutions. Arabic is necessary, but I think the challenge in the region and in the world at large is the competency in English. So there were lots of internal dynamics within even Malaysian society, and of course internationally, about charting the course for the university. And of course, in this, I share totally with the sentiments expressed by Abdul Hamid, and of course, the other brothers, Sheikh Taha, Jabir, Ahmad, Yaqub, were there, Isham, in a series of meetings, other than, of course, scholars here, Malaysian scholars and also international scholars already attached to the university. So there was that problem, and I had to work extremely hard to convince the other colleagues, particularly the finance ministry, to get additional allocation. So we had to start, I should say, not to our general satisfaction, and this warfare, protracted war between Anwar and Hamid continues. Because I think he comes from a tradition that, and I always consider that Abdul Hamid, I'm not a Saudi sheikh. I don't have this disbursing funds easily. I have to be, accountable. I go to the allocation, strict allocation for the ministry, and the budget announced a year earlier. Supplementary budget would have some constraints, limits. So the first 1 or 2 years was tough, but fortunately in 1990, and I was appointed as Minister of Finance, and that would be able to facilitate this new change and direction of the university. So the allocation naturally became much more, double the original allocation. And we brought in Ahmad Farid Mustafa, Ahmad Rest, this profound known architect from the Middle East, to come and advise us. And of course, when they come to me, I start to cutting. Because the finance minister's job is to cut. Otherwise, he will never be a successful minister of finance. So there is he will suggest 4 towers for the mosque. I say, 1 is enough. People can see from a distance, you don't need to have 4. So these are things, a continuous argument. But Abdul Hamid, to do justice to him, is not just an ordinary academic scholar. He was very meticulous in his job, to the extreme. And at times, forgive me for saying this, and I must apologize to him, he was annoying. Because I was Minister of Finance, I can't be spending time to talk about this type of floor tiles, and we want the roof to be this way, the design that way, and that color. I said, I don't care, just have a good one, get a good architect, engineer, be done with it. No, he said, you have to approve this. Because I go through the normal process, he can't get the approval because it may cost more. So he put a challenge, he said, look, allow us to give some space, latitude, to decide on the mode of the contractual thing, which was very difficult for finance ministry. But then I persuaded the contract division to work with the ministry, with the university, and actually he was right. The building became comparatively more luxurious, more presentable, but at a much lower cost. And from the initial period, the Ministry of Finance was a bit relaxed with the university. And there was that time soon afterwards, there was this idea of setting up ISTEC by Professor Naqib Al-Atas. He wants to be a semi-autonomous institution under the IIUM. And knowing Professor Naqib, there are different itijahat, different trends, different schools, but the same difficult minds. And so I thought the only way to be able to work, I had to be chair. That was the reason I continued to become the president of this Islamic University, because I thought it would be difficult for anyone else to work given the pressure and the passion, both by Abdul Hamid and Naqib Al-Atas. But you know, they are not only intellectually credible, but character-wise, they're impeccable. They are not corrupt. They don't take commissions. Contractors don't need to give them, showering them with gifts and money. So that gives me clear satisfaction. Even when Kamal may not know this, because one year the Auditor General came to see me because the manner that we went through the process was not too strict according to the Finance Ministry rules. So I called up the file. I think Omar Jafar was the registrar, but they were satisfied, because I think although some of the procedures was not observed, but the cost was substantially lower. So that is my story with Abdul Hamid. I spent a lot of time on the weekends when I'm free, few hours, arguing with him in his house in Petaling Jaya. And Faikah, his wife, would always start with a complaint to me, Anwar, I'm not happy. I said, why? Abdul Hamid is married again. I said, what? To the university. You know, he goes 9, 10 in the morning times, and he comes back 11, 12. So I suspect he has a wife. Now, of course, she was joking, but because that was his dedication, he was so committed. I have not seen, rarely have I seen in my 4 decades or more of public work and service, a person so passionate and dedicated to an institution as Abdul Hamid. This is, I mean, not an exaggeration. He was obsessed to the thing. Sometimes when we talk, I said, Abdul Hamid, we're having breakfast together, one condition. I said, what? We're not going to discuss IIU. Okay, there was one session I had in his house. We had about 2-3 hours together, but the condition was not a word about IIU. Because with the moment we mention IIU, then we have to get these heated arguments because of the expenses and the costs and things like that. And you know, I have also some strong views about the name of some of the kuliah, etc., etc. So anyway, that's again remarkable that we are talking about a remarkable man. Now let us talk about some of his ideas. Now, long before the setting up of this university, when he was Secretary General of the WAMI, I was in prison, and he was invited. We invited him to the Abi Muqtamar. And the central thesis of his argument even then, the problem of the Ummah, not only the Malays in terms of poor education and ignorance, but the little understanding of Islam is subjected to the fiqh mentalities. Everything is right, wrong, and how one must be punished. So the entire learning, scope of learning, from most to tazkirah to the pati, is all punishment. And he said this fiqh mentality would certainly be a major challenge, because it is quite domineering in terms of Islamic understanding in the society. I then discuss with him what he meant, because I thought if you start talking about and criticizing the fiqh, then you may have this reaction among the traditional scholars. So he expounded, it's true, but certainly it's not an easy move, because there is our training, and it is now, you know, we talk about neoconservatism of the West. Paul Wolfowitz and Trump, the obsession about their understanding, their ideas, and no tolerance of the other, complete submission to the power elite, no critical consciousness. You compare this, we have the same neoconservatism among the Muslims. No critical consciousness, never to question why, whatever the Sheikh or the Guru says, is all wala, complete submission and loyalty. So it is a major challenge that, of course, not only Jabba IT, but the International Islamic University must deal with. Yesterday we had this conference, Integration of Knowledge. I'm not going to repeat what I thought was the key issues that we should address, but the university have done remarkably well, although I think in all humility you must say, more need to be done. To rephrase George Bernard Shaw, every time people come and praise him for his great eloquence and oratory, or somebody meeting some actresses or pianists who think so much of himself or herself, he would say brilliant, but still room for improvement. That should be the central message to Muslims, because after all, what is itqan fil amal? Excellence. If we start overpraising ourselves, countries have fallen, economies destroyed, because what was taught is that what is being done is already correct or excellent or satisfactory. When we lack the critical consciousness, we fail in our endeavor. Now, Abdul Hamid talks about the desert culture. In politics and governance, again to rephrase Ibn Khaldun of the Umran Badawi, this is the same trends are there. So when you talk about freedom, you talk about critical consciousness, you talk about excellence education, there's very little rapport and understanding among those elites. I'm not talking about the general public, because the strong influence of what he termed as the desert culture. No, we don't have desert, thankfully, so probably we can exclude ourselves. So the nomadic among the Arabs could have a lot of deserts in Africa and Middle East. But I think desert, what he meant was essentially nomadic, the conservative and neo-conservative outlook, that tribalism, racism supersede the rahmat lil alamin, the central message, and also message of excellence. So this university, according to Abdul Hamid, that we share, is domestication of the ideas of making the center of excellence for the building of civilization. Until and unless we are able to create that sort of awareness, which is clearly not the preoccupation of a university but also of the society, then we will not be able to be really satisfied and idle. Finally, I'm supposed to give a 1 hour lecture. Finally, let me say this. Abdul Hamid is essentially a thinker, although he's proven himself to be a good manager. And therefore, you can appreciate the juxtaposition of ideas between him and me. I believe in good governance. He says no, through a good education first. So I said there will not be good education if you don't have good government supporting the ideas. He said without good education we will not be able to create this group of elite to be in government. So there's no solution. And he said, of course, rightly, and I mentioned this elsewhere, that give an example of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, which normally people talk about al-Ayyubi as a great warrior, the great in the great battle against the Crusaders, and Salahuddin as compared to Richard the Lionheart. But they fail to realize that 10 years earlier, Salahuddin was just building institutions, creating this whole culture of awareness in mosques, in schools, to get a new vigor and understanding among Muslims. So he spent a lot of time in improving governance through education. So when Abdul Hamid mentioned that, I immediately held it and said, look, you have to have the Salahuddin to initiate that reform. In uridu illa islah mastata, must begin also jointly, if you say, at least. So we compromise. It is a joint effort. Because otherwise you would say, he would always be cynical about political leaders and governance. And I would say these academics are dreamers. So finally we reach a compromise that some of us have to do in the area of our expertise. Because you talk about that culture, the tradition of scholarship, that became a lazzatul ma'rifah, as Ali ibn Abi Talib described. But there has to be some authority or elements in government that would be able to give that freedom and creativity. I mean, even the university, with different orientation governments, would have been quite restrictive in many things. I know for a fact, because for 20 years I could not enter the university. I'm not taking a personal point here, because I know there was a position of the government. Which means the whole spirit of creativity, which is essential in building scholarship and university, is not to be lacking. If you disallow, free flow of ideas, reason, dialogue, and debate, that's important. And that is what it takes to be a university. And now, of course, in terms of new thinking, I suggested yesterday that in all kulliyas, not only in IT or technology related, digital technology is a must, as much as you say Islam. Fundamentals of Islam is a must in all kulliyah. Similarly, the capacity and ability of students to master this element technology is also a must. Because when I launched the DNA 23, I'm not talking about elite controlling the technology, but I'm talking about the power of the masses. And that has got to therefore permit all disciplines. Thank you to Yaqub Mirza, who actually helped to coordinate this event. Abdul Hamid mentioned this specifically, and I, of course, feels sad that he is not able to attend. He loves university, and Faika is true that I think it is a real competition between the university and his wife. Unlike me, because my wife is my boss, so I have no competition. So I would have loved to host him here, frankly, because I think we should do a service and be just to those who have contributed immensely. Of course, there are many others who have contributed, but from that I know as Minister of Education, Spas University, and Finance Minister of the government, when we had a lot of funds, without Abdul Hamid, I don't think I would be able to be pushed in this direction, building not only this university but also the medical campus in Kuantan. And this is unique, not only in this country but in this region. And I got a lot of flack for that, because many of my colleagues in the country, in the other universities, were extremely unhappy that they said that I have been too biased. I said no, because we promised to have this university not just a local institution, but an international Islamic university. And more so, look, whatever funds he has, including zakat, his decision is clear, is for IIUM, period. And it's amazing person to have, been done so much service, dedicated himself, and now the fund, this Abu Sulaiman Education Fund or Scholarship Fund is started with $250,000, but I think I trust with the assistance of Dr. Yaqub Mirza, who's an excellent financial consultant, would continue. This is the beginning. $250,000 is a good beginning to start with this fund. And let me assure you that I would also do my part. We have done so with IDB when Dr. Ahmad Mama Ali was around to assist those days. But the government has certainly some constraints now. As I said, I wouldn't be, if I've offered the Minister of Finance now, I will not serve, because unlike before, we had a lot of funds. The growth was 10%, now it's 4.5. So the only answer that my friend 1A could give is always, we look at it, we cannot approve now, we can consider to approve later. That's only the standard reply, because we are in very financial constraints now. But I think we would require, therefore, the efforts of many friends and colleagues here, and also internationally. And I think it is a great thing that we have signed it to Yaqub to coordinate, and we will work together with Ahmad and the rest to try and assist and alleviate the problems of our students. I'm quite responsible because the intake of foreign students was decided essentially by me at the time, to take from Bosnia and Albania and Afghanistan and Patani and Aceh. And when Abdul Hamid said, how many? I said, take as many as you like, as you can, as long as they don't create problems in this country. So that was the beginning, and so I'm partly responsible for that, and I think we need to assist those in difficulty, including a lot of local students, Ahmad. It is not just foreign students, a lot of local students. Last month became a big issue when some local students are complaining they only take Maggi for lunch and dinner. There was, the parliament was in session, and I had to appeal strongly. I said, we cannot, under whatever reason or rationale, defend this state of affairs. And it was good because the finance minister then immediately gave them a 3 million ringgit grant that is being managed by our colleague Saifuddin Nasution, the minister, that gives food assistance to all poor students. It's also done here. Yeah, great. So I think it is our duty. I mean, that is the state of affairs now, which we need to do more. I again thank you very much. I apologize for this rather lengthy lecture, because we have to do justice to Abdul Hamid. And I want you to hear the deliberations today and the presence of many of our colleagues, including the tripartite representatives from abroad. We have including Manzoor from India and Habib Razak from Indonesia. And Yaqub traveled all the way from the United States, and Ahmad and Muhammad from Turkey. So it's an impressive presence of brothers in honor of our great friend and colleague, Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.